Hi, guys. Welcome to week 6 of our online mythology classes. If you have access to paper, pencil, crayon, marker, anything like that, maybe grab them really quick. You can pause the video and go grab them. You can either draw about the things that we're hearing about in these stories, or you can draw whatever you want while listening. So we are still in the Micmac legends, which the Micmac tribe we looked up are in the Nova Scotia area, so that's where we are. And we actually ended in the middle of a story last week. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Just as a reminder, we're in the middle of that story that has the really long title. So the name of this story, as a reminder, is Of the Surprising and Singular Adventures of Two Water Fairies Who Were Also Weasels, and How They Became the Bride of a Star, including the mysterious and wonderful works of Lox, the great Indian devil who rose from the dead. That's the name of this story. So we had read about how these two guys, one of them went and saw that some water fairies were bathing, and he stole their clothes so that they would chase after him. And when the one he liked caught up to him, he tapped her on the head with a little stick, and apparently that means that she's married to him. Kind of a weird custom. But so she is now his wife, and then he went and did that with another fairy woman. So now he has two wives, and his friend is upset that he has two wives and for himself he has none. So he started fighting with him, and every day they would fight and fight. So eventually the fairy women decide to run away because they don't like these men trying to kill each other each day. And then as they're running away, they are looking at the stars one night, and one of them says, "Oh, I really like that red twinkling star. If I was to marry a star, it would be that one." And the other one says, "If I were to marry a star, it would be that glowing yellow one because it's really big and I like big stars." And then we read the first sentence of the next part. They woke up and found themselves married to those stars. So these poor fairy women keep getting married through no fault of their own. And that's where we left off last week. So let's see what happens with these poor fairy women. And those of you that have been taking this class, a few weeks ago, we read a story very similar to this with the star wife part. So this next section might sound a bit familiar. It sounds like it's going to be a retelling of the same story we already read. But then we're going to have another section after that because they promised us an Indian devil or something like that. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so just to back up, we had read this sentence last week, but I think this is a good starting place. But many a word spoken in jest is recalled in earnest, as these brides learned when they awoke and found themselves married again in the Indian manner at only a word. For she who had wished for the great yellow shining star, as she opened her eyes, heard a man's voice say, "Take care, or you will upset my war paint." And lo, there lay by her side a great and handsome man, very noble, with large and lustrous eyes. Then the other, as she awoke and stirred, heard a little feeble cracked voice crying, "Take care, or you will spill my eye water." I don't know that. What do you think eye water is? The only thing I can think of is like contact solution, but I'm pretty sure that's not what they're talking about. I draw what you think eye water is. I'm curious. And by her was the smaller star, whom she had chosen. But he was a weak-looking old fellow with little red twinkling eyes. And as they had chosen, so it came unto them. Okay, so they wake up married to these two stars, but the stars are men. The yellow glowing one is actually a very handsome man with lustrous eyes, and he's noble. And then the little red star as a man is a weak-looking old guy who's little and has twinkling red eyes and doesn't want her to spill his eye water. I'm sorry, I'm going to be stuck on that because I really want to know what eye water is now. Maybe someone look it up on like your tablet or phone or something. All right, so they're married to these two men who were the stars that they wished just in jest and in passing that they would be married to. But yellow or red, young or old, in a few days they both grew a-weary of the star country to which they were taken and wished to return to the earth. And then that came to pass, which made them yearn with tenfold longing. For their husbands, who were absent all day hunting, had pointed out to them a large flat stone, which they were on no account to lift. Which they obeyed in this wise, that they did not both lift the stone, but only the younger, who, as soon as the stars had gone to the greenwood, rushed to the slab, and lifting it up, gazed greedily down into the hole beneath. Okay, yeah, this is what happened in the other story, that when they were getting bored of where they were, because they're living in the stars land, they had been told not to move this flat stone, and one of them moved it. And if you remember in the other story, when they moved the stone, it turned out they were above the earth, and that stone was covering up a hole to get down there. So I think that's what's happening here. But I like the added detail in this version that they were forbidden from moving that flat stone, and so they didn't. Only one of them did. So very much following the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. So just the younger sister moved the stone, the flat stone, and looked into the hole underneath it. And what she saw was wonderful, for it was the sky itself, and directly under them was the world in which they had lived, and specially in sight was the home of their childhood, with all its woods and rivers. And then the elder, having looked, both almost broke their hearts with weeping. Now the stars were by no means such evil-minded men as you may have deemed, for having perceived by magic that their wives had looked through the hole in the sky, and knowing that they were lying when they denied it, they gave them leave to go back to earth. Yet there were conditions, and those not easy to such fidgety damsels as these. For they said, Ye shall lie together all this night, and in the morning, when ye awake, ye shall be in no haste to open your eyes or to uncover your faces. Wait until you shall have heard the song of the Xikigilasis, or Chickadee, and even then ye shall not arise, but be quiet until the song of the red squirrel shall be heard. And even then ye must wait and keep your faces covered and your eyes closed until you hear the striped squirrel sing, and then you may leave your bed and look around. Yeah, this is how the story unfolded before when we were reading about this. So the star husbands have come back, and they know through some magic that the women looked underneath the stone slab. And even though they're denying it and lying and saying they didn't move it, the husbands know, and they're actually being pretty cool about it. They're saying, okay, well, if you want to go back home, you can go back home. And so they're telling them how they can do that. And there's a little bit of magic involved, and there's conditions that they have to follow. So when the two girls need to sleep together that night, and then when they wake up, they're not supposed to open their eyes. So then when they hear the chickadee, the bird singing, they still need to keep their eyes closed. And then they're going to hear a red squirrel, and they still need to keep their eyes closed. And it's not until they hear, I think it's the striped squirrel, is that right? That they're supposed to open their eyes and leave their bed. So those of you that were hearing our story last time we heard this one know what's going to happen. But you know what? I was mentioning this last week, and I'm going to say it again. Whenever in these stories someone is given specific instructions of what not to do, they always do it. They always break the rules, even if they're simple. So let's see if this follows suit. Now the younger wife was ever impatient, and when the chickadee sang, she would have leaped up at once, but the elder restrained her. Wait, she said, my sister, until we hear the ablokakmowitch. And she lay still till the adududich began his early chatter and his morning's work. Then, without waiting, she jumped up, as did the elder, when they found themselves indeed on earth, but in the summit of a tall, spreading hemlock tree, and that in such a manner that they could not descend without assistance. And it had come to pass in this wise, for as each song was sung by the bird and the squirrels, they had come nearer and nearer to the earth, even as the light of day drew near. But as they could not delay, they had been deserted. Okay, so they didn't follow those specific conditions. They opened their eyes when they heard the red squirrel singing, when they were supposed to wait for the striped squirrel. And so when they opened their eyes and jumped up out of bed, they didn't find themselves down on earth exactly. They found themselves at the top of a really, really tall tree. And they're so high up that they can't climb down without help. So as they had been hearing these different animal sounds, they had been moving further down and down towards Earth, but they didn't wait long enough, so they didn't make it all the way. But they're kind of close. They're in a really tall tree. And now let's see how they get out of this tree, because it seems like they're kind of stuck. This is where the story left off when we heard it before, so I'm excited to see what comes next. And as they sat there and day dawned, men of the different families went by, and unto all of these they cried for help. It is true that their star husbands had made for them in the tree a bed of moss, but they cared not to rest in the hemlock for all that. And of all the beasts of the forest or men of the clearing, who should be the first to appear but Team, or Master Moose himself? So if you remember from last week, Team is one of the men that I want to say Team was the one that wanted the wives but didn't have them. Man, I wish I could remember, because there was Martin and Team, and I think Martin was the one that made both of these fairy women his wife, and Team was the neighbor and friend who wanted one of the wives but didn't get one. I think that's how it is. If I'm wrong, I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. So as they're calling out to all the men walking by, the first one whose attention they grab is Team. Let's see, where did I get to? And to him they cried, oh geez, necessinen aqualin, necessinen. Wow, my pronunciation's creative today. Oh, our elder brother, let us free, take us down, and we will be your 2 dear little wives and go home with you. But he, looking up scornfully, said, I was married this autumn. And so he went away. Okay, so I remembered right. He was the one that didn't marry either of them. And so they're calling down to him saying, hey, help us down and we'll marry you. We'll be your wives. And he is, I guess, a little feeling a little grudge against them. And so he looks up at them and says, I was married in autumn, and then walks off without helping them. And he who next came was the shaggy bear, or Mooin, to whom they made the same request, offering themselves for no higher price than to be taken down safely out of their nest. But he growled out that he had been married in the spring, and that one wife was enough for any man. So he went his way. And then who should come along but Martin himself, whom they had deserted? And they cried out for joy, begging him to take them back. But he, behaving as if they were utter strangers, replied that he had been married in the early spring to one of his own tribe, and unto a damsel whose name was Martin, and that it was not seemly for animals to wed out of their own kind. So he scampered off, leaving the little weasels all alone. Okay, and that's the first time that they've mentioned that the fairy women are weasels. It was in the title of the story, but this is the first time they've mentioned it in the story. So after Team leaves saying, oh, I already got married, I'm not helping you, they see the bear walk by, and they call out to the bear and say, hey, we'll marry you if you help us down. He says, I just got married in the spring, and walks off. And then Martin comes, their husband that they deserted when they ran away and ended up in the Stars Kingdom. So they call out to him, and he doesn't have very nice feelings towards them. I guess when 2 wives abandon you, you're not going to think fondly of them. So he says that he got married also in the spring, and that he married someone of his own tribe, and you shouldn't marry other kinds of animals. So he leaves too. All right. And last of all came Lox, whom hunters call the Indian devil, and others the wolverine, who is exceeding subtle above the beasts of the forest, and who is gifted with more evil mischief than all of them in one. And when the weasels called to him for help, he tarried, for it came into his heart that he might in some way torment and tease them. Okay, I still feel bad for these fairy women. So Lox, the Indian devil, or it sounds like he's Wolverine, so is walking by, and they call out for help like they have been everyone. And he stops, not because he really wants to marry them, but because he wants to torment and tease them. Poor women. They just want help out of the tree. But let's see how Lox decides he's going to torment them. But verily he had to deal with those who were not much more virtuous than himself, and quite as cunning. For what with traveling from the earth to the heavens and changing husbands, these fair Minivers were learning wisdom rapidly. So the elder sister, who had not the least idea of keeping her promise unless it suited her fancy, played a trick, and that quickly and on. For she at once took off her hair string and tied it into a few less than 100 knots among the twigs of the trees, tangling it so that you would have deemed it a week's work before a man could loosen it again without injury. Okay, so she's taken her hair string and tied it into a bunch of knots in the twigs of the tree that they're in, so that it would take a long time to loosen it and get it loose from the tree. Now Master Lox, having taken down the younger sister with all the politeness in the world, came for the other, and aided her also to descend. And when on the ground, she indeed said, "Willie oon, I thank you," but begged him to go up the tree again and bring down a great treasure which she had left there, her hair string, beseeching him for all their lives not to break or injure it in any way, but to most carefully untie every knot, for thus doing it would bring untold felicity on them all, and that they, the weasels, would meantime build a beautiful bridal bower or a wigwam, and that so furnished as he had never seen the like before, in which verily they kept their word. Okay, so the Lox helps the younger sister down from the tree, and then when he goes back up for the elder sister, he brings her down, and she says, "Oh, thank you so much, but my greatest treasure is still up in the tree. It's my hair string. Can you go up and get it for me? And please don't hurt it at all. You have to untie it carefully so nothing happens to it. And while you're doing that, we'll build a nice house down here for us." Right, for they speedily built the wigwam, but the furniture thereof was of this rare kind. The weasels had, it seems, certain sworn friends, for birds of a feather flock together, and these were not far to seek, as they were the thorns, burrs, and briars of all kinds, hornets, and other winged and stinged insects besides the ants. And they were moreover intimate with all the sharp-edged flints in the land, which was a goodly company. So when the bower was built, it had therein a hornet's nest for a bridal bed, thorns for a carpet, flints for a floor, and an ant's nest for a seat, which for a bare-footed and bare-breeched Indian is indeed a sore assay. Now it had taken Master Lox the entire day to untie the hair string, so when he came down it was dark, and he was glad when he saw the hut and thought of resting therein. Oh man, my sympathy's moving over to Lox now, because they built a house, but they made the bed and the seats and everything out of like hornets and thorns and ants and stuff like that. And when he gets done untying the hair string, it's dark, and so he can't see these things, and he's like, "Oh, they did build the house. Nice. I could use a rest." Oh, poor guy. I'm worried for him. But as he entered, he ran among the thorns, which pierced his nose, and flints, which cut his feet, so that he roared aloud. Then he heard a voice which seemed to be that of the younger Miss Weasel, crying, "Nameskull, go to my sister yonder." So he went and trod in an ant-hill, and this was worse than the briars. And then he heard another voice on that side which cried, laughing, "Niquetchkali, go to my sister, who is younger than I." And plunging furiously through the darkness, he fell on the hornet's nest, and verily the last state of that was worst of all. Thus seeing himself mocked, he became furious, so that he, who has by nature the very worst temper of all beasts or men, was never so angry before. And seeking the tracks of the weasels, he pursued them as they fled in the night and through the thick forest. Okay, so they have led him into the house, into all of kind of the traps they built in there. So he steps on flints and gets his feet all cut off. He runs into thorns and it pokes through his nose, and he steps on an anthill and he falls into the hornet's nest, and he realizes that it's their doing. It was all on purpose, and he is mad. And apparently he is someone who doesn't have a really good temperament to begin with, but he's never been so mad as he is right now. So now he's chasing after the sisters. Now it came to pass that by daybreak the two girls, even the Mrs. Weasel, had come to a broad river which they could not cross. But in the edge of the water stood a large crane motionless, or the Tomgolikunach, who was the ferryman. Now truly this is esteemed to be the least beautiful of all the birds, for which cause he is greedy of good words and fondest of flattery. And of all beings there were none who had more bear's oils ready to anoint everyone's hair with, that is to say, more compliments ready for everybody, than the weasels. Okay, that's a kind of a fun saying. So bear's oils ready to anoint everyone's hair apparently means complimenting everybody. Kind of a fun little saying. But the weasel women, it's funny how they turned from the fairy women to the weasel women, but they are ready to flatter and compliment the crane, who is the ferryman for the river that they need to cross. So seeing the crane, they sang, "The crane has a very beautiful long neck. The crane has a very beautiful long neck." This charmed the old ferryman very much, and when they said, "Please, grandfather, hurry along," he came quickly. Seeing this, they began to chant in chorus sweetly as the 7 stars themselves. "The crane has very beautiful long legs. The crane has very beautiful long legs." Hearing this, the good crane wanted more. So when they asked him to give them a lift across, he answered slowly that to do so he must be well paid, but that good praise would answer as well. Now they who had abundance of this and to spare for everybody were these very girls. "Have I not a beautiful form?" he inquired, and they both cried aloud, "Oh, uncle, it is indeed beautiful." "And my feathers?" "Ah, Pegia Kopchu, beautiful and straight feathers indeed." "And have I not a charming long straight neck?" "Truly, our uncle has it straight and long." "And will ye not acknowledge, O maidens, that my legs are fine?" "Fine! Oh, uncle, they are perfection. Never in this life did we see such legs." So, being well pleased, the crane put them across, and then the 2 little weasels scampered like mice into the bush. And scarcely were they concealed, or the crane well again in his place, ere Master Lox appeared. And being in no good temper, he called to Uncle Crane to set him across, and that speedily. Now the crane had been made mightily pleased and proud by the winsome words of the weasels, and was but little inclined to be rudely addressed. And so he said to Lox, "I will bear thee over the river if thou wilt bear witness to my beauty. Are not my legs straight?" "Yea," replied the Lox, "and beautifully painted too." Now the color thereof was little pleasing to poor Uncle Crane. "Are not my feathers very smooth and fine?" "Yea, smooth and fine. What a pity, though, that they are mildewed and dusty." "And my straight neck?" "Yes, wonderfully straight. Straight as this," said Lox to himself, taking up a crooked stick. And then he sang, "The crane has a very ugly neck. The crane has dirty, ugly legs." "Come, grandfather, hurry up. Oh, the crane has a very ugly neck. The crane has dirty, ugly legs." Okay, Lox isn't a very smart guy, it seems. So he's trying to get the crane to get him across the river quickly so that he can chase the weasel women. And the crane has asked of him what he asked of the weasel women. "Okay, can you pay me some compliments? What about this about me? What about this about me?" And Lox is not doing it that well. He's not complimenting him. He says, "Yeah, your feathers are smooth, but it's too bad that they're all mildewed and dusty. And oh yeah, you have a straight neck, as straight as this crooked stick I'm holding." And then he starts singing a song about how the crane has an ugly neck and dirty, ugly legs. And then in the middle of the song says, "Come on, hurry up," and then sings the song again. So not that bright of a guy. "I wish you to be quick. Hurry up, I say." And all of this ill temper and insincerity was deeply and inwardly detected by Uncle Crane, but he said not a word, and only meekly bent him down to take the traveler on his back. But when in the stream, and where it was deepest and most dangerous, he gave himself a shake, and in another instant Lox was whirling round and round like a chip in the rapids. And yet a little time he was dashed against the rocks, and then anon was thrown high and dry on the shore, but dead as a 7-year-old cedar cone. Okay, so Crane's taking him across, and when he's to the deepest part of the stream or river, whatever it is they're crossing, he shakes a little bit, and that knocks Lox off of his back. So Lox is caught up in these rapids, and when he's finally reaches shore and is thrown up on shore by the waters, he's dead. Ooh. Now the Lox is a great magician at certain times and seasons, albeit his power fails him at others. And he is one of those who rise from the dead. It's a lucky trick if you got it, right? Now it came to pass that some days after, two boys of the Quidditch or Mohawk race found the Lox lying dead on a rock in the sunshine, and the worms were crawling from him. But when they touched him, he arose as if from sleep and stood before them as a proud and fierce warrior. But he was scarce alive ere he sought to do them who had roused him to life a mischief. For having noted that they had fine bows, he got them into his hands and broke them, yet all as if he meant it not. Okay, so these two boys find him and kind of help him come back to life. And as soon as he sees that these two guys have these nice bows, he immediately wants to trick them. So he grabs the bows and breaks them. Not that cool. All right, hold on. Lost my place. Oh, and he pretended that he didn't mean to break them. And then by magic, making a sound as of many children at play afar off, across the next point of land by the river, he bade them run and join the pleasant games. And when he had got them a space onward, lo, the sound seemed ever farther on, mingled with the murmur of the stream. And so they went without him, seeking it, and yet it wandered ever farther away. Now he had learned from the boys that they were of a Kulo family, and the Kulus are certain monstrous birds, exceeding fierce. But Master Lox, having seen in the cabin plenty of fine meat, desired greatly to become one of the family, and having been much about in life, knew something of the ways of everyone. So putting on the Kulu style, he, seeing a babe, began to sing with the most natural air in the world a Kulu nursery song. A sealskin strap, a shoulder strap. That's the whole song. Now it costs very little to fall into the humor of a man, but this the woman would not do, and told him plainly that he could not deceive her. On hearing which, Master Lox in a great rage seized his tomahawk and slew her. Then, seeing a kettle boiling on the fire, he cut off her head and put it into the pot, hiding the body. Whoa, that escalated very quickly. Okay, so the boys that kind of brought him back to life are Kulus, and Lox knows of Kulus, and so he goes to the house and he sees his baby and starts singing a Kulu nursery rhyme to it. And the woman in the house is not tricked. She's like, I know you're not Kulu. And he gets mad and kills her, cuts off her head, puts it in a pot that's over the fire, and then hides her body. Dude, like that got real quick. And you know what? There's quite a bit of the story left. Let's see how far we can get before we run out of time today. But man, this is getting interesting. Oh no, I hope he doesn't make her sons eat her head. That would be really messed up. But we've had a few stories like that in the past. I'm a little concerned. All right. And this was a merry jest after his own heart. Don't cut people's heads off as a joke. Not cool, okay? Don't follow his example. But it's a merry jest to him, so that it greatly solaced him. He's kind of a psychopath. But after a time, the two boys returning missed their mother, and looking into the kettle, found her head. Then they knew well who had done this, and being fearless, they pursued him. But having no bows, they could do him no harm. However, they took from him his gloves, and with these they returned. Okay, so the boys come home, they know what happened, they're chasing after him, and they can't kill him because they don't have their bows anymore. He broke them. But they managed to get his gloves and come back with those. And anon there came also an uncle of the boys, the crow. So he gave chase to Lox, yet all that he could do was to snatch away his cap as he ran. Yet without shame he cried aloud, Well, my head was getting warm, and now I am cooler. Thank you. Then came another relative, the eagle, and he, pursuing Lox, took from him his coat. Yet all unabashed he replied, Thanks unto you also, for I was just wishing that my younger brother were here to carry my coat for me. But he who now arrived, hearing of the deadly deed, was the great Kulu himself, the most terrible of all created creatures. And he, pursuing Lox, caught him up, and carrying him in his claws, even to the summit of the sky itself, let him drop. And he was a whole day in falling. Even from the first dawn unto sunset, he went down ere he touched the earth. But before he was let drop and went on high, he burst into a mocking song on what he saw, and the words were as follows. Our country all lost seems clearly to us, as though it were all spread with boughs. Hey he, hey hum, hey ho, hey hum. Our country now lost seems now unto us to be blue like the clear blue sky. Hum hum tol de roll. And when let fall, this graceless jackanapes in no wise ceased his ribaldry. For while pretending to flap with his arms as if they were wings, he imitated with his mouth mockingly the wish, wish of the wide wings of the Callooh. Yet just ere he touched the earth, he uttered one little magic spell. Oh, spare my poor backbone. And with that, all the trouble of all the birds went for nothing. Truly, he was mashed to a batter, and his blood and brains flew in every direction, like raspberry pudding. But among the remains, his backbone lay whole, and this was his life. That's kind of gruesome. Okay, so all of these different relatives are chasing after him because he killed that woman. And one of them gets his gloves, one of them gets his hat, one of them gets his coat, but they can't catch him. And each time they take these things of his, he says, oh, thanks, I was getting a little hot. Oh, thanks, I was wishing someone would carry my coat for me. And finally, the head of the family, the big Callooh bird, catches him, takes him up really high in the air, and then drops him. And he drops him from so high that he falls for a whole day. And right before he hits the ground, he whispers a magic spell to spare his backbone. And the spell works, and apparently his life is in his backbone. But it gets really gruesome as they're telling us what happened to the rest of him, because he does hit the ground, blood and stuff goes everywhere. They even say that his brains fly all over, and that it's like raspberry pudding, like very graphic. But his backbone's okay, and that's where his life is. And hold on just a minute. I'm going to see how much longer this is, because this is a long story. We're not going to finish it today. Okay. I think we'll end for today with that carnage. But man, that story took a turn for the violent, right? So we don't even really have the fairy women or the weasel women in the story anymore at this point. They've run away and he's been chasing after them. But in chasing them, he's died for a few days and then been brought back and then killed someone and then been chased by their relatives for who knows how long. And then he hasn't exactly been killed, but his body has basically been destroyed except for his backbone, which is where his life is. So I have a feeling he's still going to go on to do a bunch of stuff and somehow magically come back. But we only read part of a story today because this is a beast of a story that's really long. So hopefully next week we'll have time to finish the rest of it. So just to recap today, we had the fairy women who were living up being wives of the stars that they had been talking about. And then they looked through the hole in the ground and wished that they were home, but then they didn't follow the instructions. Then they ended up in the tree. And the only person who was willing to help them down the tree was Lox. And they tricked him so he would go up the tree, and they built this big trap house with these hornets and ants and flints and all sorts of things to hurt him. And so then he gets mad and is chasing them. And that's what started all of this, because it was while chasing them that he ended up dying in the river because he was rude to the crane. And then we got into this whole mess where he woke up, killed the woman, and now is being chased, and it got gross. Okay, so this story has changed so much since we started it with Team and Martin wanting these fairy women for wives and stealing their clothes to make them their wives. It's come a long way since then, and I have a feeling a lot of things are going to happen before it ends. So we will finish this next week. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing this today. I will say, whether you think it's kind of gross or not, it is nothing if not interesting, right? It's definitely keeping my interest. I'm very entertained by this story. So we'll finish it up next week. I hope you guys are doing well at home. I hope that you're staying safe and healthy and that you're doing fun things to keep yourself entertained. And we will finish up this story next week. Bye, guys.